Hello, dear friends. Thank you very much for your lively response. We received a great number of letters of thanks from you, and a very great number of letters with your questions, which we will try to answer in our videos. I'm pleased to introduce the participants of our today's video to you, the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Жанна.
Greetings.
Anna.
Greetings.
And Nicole.
Greetings.
Today we would like to talk about the following. That no matter how an ordinary person decorates his life with various parties, revelries, nature or family, he understands that his life is sort of grey anyway, and he asks himself questions. Is this really all? Is this all that we live for? And at that moment he understands that there is something greater, that there is God. And in search of this contact with the spiritual world, with God, where does he first turn to? He turns to religions. But what does he find there? We will speak frankly that today all religions have discredited themselves, because in most cases they fight, let's put it bluntly, for their property, and in the worst case, they actually use the flock for selfish purposes. In the same way, a person understands that in search of some happiness and freedom, he faces despotism. He comes into contact with feeling of some fear, and realizes that he should probably look for this somewhere else. And then, where does he turn? He turns to psychology. What does psychology say about whether a person can experience happiness all the time? It says, no, it's a pathological phenomenon, that only sick people can be happy all the time. These are either idiots, epileptics, schizophrenics, or…
Well, it has nothing to do with epileptics. Let's start with the fact that it's a completely different disease, and schizophrenia doesn't always give you a feeling of happiness either. But there are forms of insanity when people experience the illusion of happiness. But I'll tell you that it's much better to look at this from the perspective of insanity than when, on the contrary, there is aggression and depression. But this has nothing to do with the spiritual, of course.
Yes.
But psychology is formed as a result of watching who? People. And we know who wrote psychology as a science. As a rule, it was created and written by, and the fathers of psychology, let's say, were people who were drug addicts, alcoholics, and with a lot of their own psychological problems. That's why they created it in such an interesting and strange way, let's put it mildly. Of course, people will not find anything there.
Yes, and not finding this either in religion or, let's say, in psychology, they go to extremes. This includes chemical addictions. But the most important question is, what is God after all? What is this? Is this some kind of addiction? Is this no freedom? Is this fear that should be experienced by a person? What is God?
But according to religions, many, I don't say all, but many religions, God is something frightening, something that you should obey, something that you should be afraid of. And God forbid you should break any of His words that He supposedly said. Well, it's again the self-discipline of the body, first of all. It's the rejection of many things. Well, it's clearly depressing for people. And, as you've already said, people today are quite literate. And religion just frightens them. Frightens them, first of all, because it is an organization that cares not so much about souls as about its existence. Although it should take care, of course, about those who come to it, about their spiritual growth, their salvation, let's put it so. But people have a little different experience. One thing is said, and a completely different one is done. And it's clear that this dissonance scares people away from many religions. Therefore, where do people rush to? To various ashrams, sects, where they are supposedly loved. But in fact, they understand that both in one organization and in another it's their purse that is needed, or they themselves should serve as a tool for this organization, no more. And there is no freedom there.
Right.
Just chatter. People are certainly confused and depressed. Just look what we have today. Religions have existed for thousands of years, while in the world today we still have wars, deception and consumer-based order, which dominates not only, in the society, but also in the heads of people themselves. It's natural that people do not understand what God is and what the spiritual world is. And what is God, my friends? God, I'll put it bluntly, God is the ultimate high. It is keif. It is really so. But then again, what does the word keif mean? And here we are faced with what? Again, with that very description from the perspective of psychology,
Of medicine even.
medicine and everything else, and just different interpretations in the dictionaries. It is taking drugs, it is pleasant inaction, it is idleness, let's say in delight, and so on. While in reality, as far back as in pre-Quranic times, in the territories where the Quran originated, the word keif meant bliss in God. That is, dwelling of a man in heaven. It was the word keif, or now it is interpreted as ultimate high. So God is the sheer pleasure, first and foremost. But here we again come across pleasure is perceived by our consciousness in the interpretation of bodily pleasure, inaction or, taking alcohol or drugs, which lead to some chemical, say,
Special effects, states.
special effects, as you say, and replaces the true feeling. And why was it made that way? And why did they destroy the understanding of bliss in God, replace it with, or rather substitute it with word in the very human understanding for exactly the opposite action, for that which is pulling away from God? After all, drugs, alcohol pull away from God. And it was just introduced and associated with the word keif. Do you see how simple everything is?
Right, nowadays.
It was just undesirable and inconvenient. But in reality, bliss in God, the very bliss in joy, in infinite love, in this power that a person gains, let's say in eternity, well, how can it be described otherwise than with the word keif, a real high, whereas the rest is sham? You know, I'd compare. It is like life and cinema. Yes, we can watch a movie, imagine ourselves in the main role, play games where we have an avatar, where we supposedly create and do something there, become a king or something else. But in life, we remain what we remain. If we are not building our life here, in such a way that we have ultimate high here, then in illusion, we will not build anything, right? The same is in reality. If a person does not live in God's love, he will never know what the ultimate high is.
Yes.
That's the truth of life.
Yes, you know, you've just mentioned the ultimate high keif, and I recalled in Sufism there is a concept of fana, when a Sufi, this is like the ultimate state of searching for the path to God.
This is more like contact with the spiritual world. It's the initial contact with the spiritual world, while keif
Meaning when he's both here and there, right?
means residing. Yes, this is when primary consciousness is still, let's say, in contact with the personality, in an active contact. But there is contact with the spiritual world already, and there is so-called conscious state in connection with the spiritual world, when you can still perceive it at the level of primary consciousness controlled by you. And then it all intertwines into one state. But still, this is not full contact with the spiritual world, whereas the ultimate high, keif, means bliss already there. Therefore, these two concepts are slightly different. In Sufism, they describe the initial contact with the spiritual world, the initial experience, as incomparable to anything, and they glorify it in every way. And this is really beautiful.
Right. Yes, also, you know, they glorify it in verses, in poetry, in poems. But why do they do this? Because there were also persecutions by the religion. I mean, it was impossible to say openly, right? And so they also use words drunk, besotted. That is also
Changed. The concept of changed. Why? Indeed, at this time, when personality is still in a slight synthesis with primary consciousness, but already comes into contact with the spiritual world, then a person experiences a state which I would call, as they say in Sufism, of first love,
yes,
or the sunlight that you have seen for the first time. It is all-embracing. And this state, is still assessed by consciousness, but it already gives an enormous degree of freedom, and the person already begins to serve solely God. He won't listen to any people who will be telling him, "Listen, God wants you to tie dynamite around your body and go blast yourself," you see?
Well, yes.
Well, I am saying this figuratively. Sorry, friends, I am exaggerating, but this is related to Islam. Islam is a beautiful religion and, let's say, Sufism is one of its branches. Yes, it is attributed to a more
Mystical.
metaphysical, mystical branch, but it is simple. Yes, they have added a little bit from consciousness. They introduced a few rituals, a little bit of everything, and special effects. Well, there is a little bit of that too. But nevertheless, it is very close to the perception of the spiritual world. But organizations that are trying to control people do not like this, just as we've mentioned, which strive to ensure that everything is under control and subdued, as in any organization, let's say. That's why they persecuted the Sufis, just like in Christianity in its time. Excuse me, there were persecutions of the first Christians, of the Gnostics, right?
Yes.
After all, the persecution was quite serious. Why? Because they professed what the Prophet spoke about. They followed a straight path. And that's why they, let's say, fell out of favor of organization itself, which was striving for something different. What does the organization need? Power and money. Well, let's speak honestly. Well, isn't it so? Well, it is. Property, money, as many people as possible in subordination, and the like. Excuse me, did the Gnostics need this? No, they needed God's love, because they were actually walking towards God. They did not sell, did not trade on God's name. They did not do business on this. They did not build an organization on this. It was a community of people who really followed the path that was given to them. Of course, they were out of favor of organization at that time because they were a hindrance. After all, people saw what those ones were saying and how the other ones acted. Well, but where is more freedom? Where there is more love? Here is a simple answer. This is in all religions.
Yes, and religions last for as long as there are actually people who practice, who have experience of live communication with the spiritual world inside. What is the problem even in various religions nowadays? It is the fact that spiritual eldership is dying, spiritual fathers become fewer in number, and thus, naturally, the religions basically die away. And the reason is precisely the fact that there are no people who would be those practitioners who would really strive for this contact. There are no novices who would want to take over this knowledge,
No,
and
but the knowledge itself, you mean the experience itself,
the very experience of life inside.
the knowledge which it is everywhere.
Yes.
But the knowledge that the Holy Fathers were using, they used what had been written before them. They used the practical experience of other people. This is mentioned. Yes, of course, there is a lot of superficial. Many, excuse me, were engaged in simony, tried to imitate truly spiritual fathers and so on. But the fact that you mentioned that fewer and fewer, indeed, fewer, yet what is happening? Let's take the abode. Well, under the protection of the Most Holy Mother of God, the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Yes.
I mean ethos. After all, there were a lot of spiritual elders. This abode was exactly for those who walked towards God. But what do we see now?
A place that will help to come into contact, as many people think.
Absolutely right. I do not want to criticize, not at all. Everyone goes to God by himself and shouldn't liken himself to and look at anyone, who is good, who is bad, and the like. But frankly speaking, when something that should be holy simply turns into a business, well,
right, it becomes history, yes.
this is wrong. There must be at least something holy in this world. Moreover, this is the heritage of all people. Therefore, I would put it this way. There shouldn't be trading in seats, and there shouldn't be storytellers. There really should be those who go to God, whereas that one is merely a place of pilgrimage, just business and...
Yes, therefore, it is also interesting why there are actually so few of those who sincerely walk towards God. This is because people often have the understanding that when you already have the knowledge, when you possess certain information and experience of people who came to God, then people sort of stop at this. But in actual fact, the real spiritual path begins exactly at the moment when this internal dialogue with God begins, when you begin to slowly generate and create something just out of nothing. And when this understanding came to me in my time that I was really holding on tight to it, and I listened to different people who shared their experience on how they had started this moment of generating. When, in fact, at first you really, it doesn't work out for you. You are as if empty, but the only thing you have is some kind of very strong desire, and you really want to manifest this love. And you don't even know how. And with all aspiration, you just begin to show some kind of gratitude at first, simply because there is such an opportunity in general, for the chance to live, for the fact that you have this life already now, and the realization that there may also be life eternal simply begins to overwhelm you with very strong gratitude. I think, and it's true, that gratitude to the spiritual world for the fact that we, in general, have the opportunity to be born, become a spiritual being, and gain life is the very first step. When you already have this gratitude and love for this life and for this chance. And little by little, when you begin to work on yourself and take the first steps, you're kind of being supported and you feel that you are loved. Regardless whether you stumble, make mistakes or not, you are loved. And you begin to sincerely love in return.
Well, after all, we love our children too, even when they begin to learn to walk and fall. After all, we do not abandon them due to the fact that they fall while taking their first steps, right? We are trying to support them, to help them get up. The question is, when they learn to walk, where will they go? It's the same here. During the spiritual growth of a person himself, on his path, when he really comes into contact with the spiritual world, not in illusions, not in fantasies in his head, but in reality, when he makes efforts not in a game, not in order to give some appearance to anyone, but truly, and he truly gains experience, then it is extremely difficult to refuse it. It's possible, I'm not saying that it's impossible. This happens when a person is seduced, anything can happen in life. He makes a mistake. But it is impossible to refuse it because the biggest loss that a person can have is the loss of this inner spiritual love if he comes into contact with it. This is much harder than losing a life, losing near and dear ones, the whole world and everything else. Well, all that relates to the mind, while this relates to life. Of course it is hard. Nevertheless, when a person comes into contact, then he doesn't want to lose this. How can you lose or strive to lose what you are? The true life.
And there is also a paradoxical moment. When in spiritual practices you achieve this contact, the manifestation of the spiritual world, then it becomes such a great shock for you, because you basically couldn't even think that this is the spiritual world, that this is precisely the manifestation of the spiritual world and God.
But it becomes a big shock for your consciousness.
Yes, right. Why? Because what is it like for consciousness?
It gets scared, it doesn't like it.
Yes.
Yet what does a person gain? Well, as they say in psychiatry, split personality, right? That is, he begins to perceive himself as a personality already and not like consciousness. He understands that there is consciousness that is almost like him. If he gets a little carried away, he already shifts into consciousness. Well, personality is fluid to such an extent, right? Where it invests attention, that's what it is. If it invests it in the material, in all the problems, who hasn't encountered this, right? And you're sort of already there. But the whole point is to always stay in God, always stay with love. Whereas all this three-dimensionality, yes, it doesn't disappear anywhere. Either life or everyday duties or all the relationships with people here, let's say with oneself too, it all remains. It remains under control and you already look at this, almost like it's somebody else's. It turns out to be just like a computer game, only already in reality. That is, you continue to play this game. And unfortunately, you understand a lot, even the bad things that can happen now, but you understand that you have no other moves, so you have to make this move. This is normal, but everything bad has nothing to do with reality, with life. It is all temporary stay here, the games of the mind.
Игорь Михайлович, You said that God is the ultimate high, it is kaif. Can a person feel it during his lifetime?
A person must feel him during his lifetime.
Why should a person look for this ultimate
And
high?
not only must he feel it, but he must be constantly high.
Great.
But in a true way. While what does being constantly high mean in our society? Either using drugs or drinking, right? That which exactly keeps people away from God.
Yes.
Look at how
Addiction.
paradoxical it is. Yes, how
Substituted.
the system itself and human consciousness perverts and substitutes even such sacred things as, well, being constantly high. What does being high under kaif mean? In other words, being constantly
Get high.
in God's love, in the bliss with God.
Yes.
That is, to be constantly in this love, under God's love. Who does not want this, excuse me? Well, I think even demons would like it because this is a great power, this is love, this is eternal life. What can be better? What can Satan offer a person? An illusion. Remember how Jesus Christ, he walked when he was in the desert. How was Satan seducing him? He was seducing him with whatever possible. Well, that's funny.
Yes.
Because only a dead one can accept this, while the inevitably alive one surely won't accept this. What kingdoms of the world? What for? What is this? And what is the kingdom of the world? Ask the kings if you want to know how they live. It's an illusion for us, those who are not kings of this world, right? When we are, let's say, subordinate to kings, it seems to us that they live well. But they live under the control of their consciousness, with more problems than we have.
Dependence is even greater, yes?
Absolute dependence on anything and anyone, including us.
I even recalled about Goethe once sincerely said that for all my 75 years of life, I can hardly remember merely 4 weeks, during which I was at least in some more or less good state of happiness, although people were jealous of him and treated him with such envy.
Yes, also concerning this topic, the topic of renunciation. That is, people are afraid of renouncing something that doesn't really belong to them. Meaning, what can one actually renounce?
The illusion of possession.
Yes, that's exactly what a person can get rid of. His selfish theories, concepts, dogmas of some sort, some, well, far-fetched things. You can really get rid of this if you step towards your inner. Yes, when this liberation is in process, when you go towards what is really your nature, what really fills you from the inside, what is really by nature.
The essence and point of a human.
Yes, the essence of the whole stay here at all. After all, as
Of
long as
course.
there is no this very essence of staying here, a person suffers from fear, a person suffers from the fact that something is wrong about him. So he's constantly looking for some problems, right? It's not even that he's looking for them, but he's constantly sort of...
He lives in them.
Yes, he lives in them, and...
He isn't looking for them, it's just consciousness that forms these everlasting problems for him.
Yes.
He is constantly in some kind of hustle and bustle, busy and worried. Good emotional experience or bad ones, it doesn't matter. He's constantly having emotions.
And after all, that's the background he creates for himself.
And who else?
After all...
But he doesn't create it. It's consciousness that creates it for him.
Well, yes.
These are tools, but he pays for them. He is exactly the generator of the energy
that supports it all.
that he gives. And he supports these problems that are imposed on him. Well...
But in fact, yes, where do all these problems come from? Because actually we're constantly in pursuit of this feeling, basically, because when you felt it, you recalled the moments when you already felt it before. And it was during the primary surge, during the secondary surge. I mean, you didn't remember this at all, as if your consciousness had wiped this out, as if this didn't exist at all. But you do remember that feeling in manifestation. And as it turns out, that's what you've been chasing all your life. And where do problems come from? From the fact that when you recall the situation, when you felt it in full, consciousness binds it to some external picture, meaning you're trying to...
Absolutely. And again, when there's a surge, after all it lasts for seconds or milliseconds, but it's like the universe opens up in front of a person, meaning there's a flash of love and power in him, and the child experiences it. But what is he led by? And Nicole said it correctly now, a picture. And unwittingly consciousness clings to, creates some associative series.
General
It
atmosphere.
clings to the picture, to the situation, to something else.
So it turns out to be a throw over, it immediately...
Definitely.
Yes.
A substitution, an instantaneous substitution, and subsequent wiping out takes place. And so, many people don't remember when there was the primary surge, right? That is, they need special practices so that a person can remember this. Well, isn't it so? Or when a person really reaches contact with the spiritual world already, then everything is open to him. Then he recalls it. As Nicole says, all these moments are opened, but from the other side. and you already understand not only what gifts come from the spiritual world, but also how everything is usurped by the one who we call the devil, meaning how easily and simply consciousness actually replaces everything for us.
It's amazing. It lasts for seconds, but to what extent for a person,
It's like eternity.
to what extent this is actually a big power, that throughout his life a person cannot stop in order to find and repeat these events.
Well, of course. Again, how does a child perceive this? Like a huge surge of freedom and joy. And then he got distracted and it went away, right? I mean, it's like a geyser. There's an explosion and some water fell. But then again, the memory of this remains forever. However, not the memory of the situation itself, but the memory of that feeling that personality strives for. Because this search is exactly the search from the spiritual world. And this very desire and striving for home, for a contact, it remains the motivator in the person that pushes him towards the spiritual path. But consciousness can easily overcome this. It can win again due to plenty of reasons.
Redirect
The surroundings.
to some...
Yes, redirect or make a substitution. Instead of looking for the spiritual, take a drug, eat some mushrooms. Create an illusion, an appearance.
build an empire.
Well, or build at least a small empire in which you will be king. Yes, meaning a family unit, and be a leader there if you cannot do more.
Yes, well, it redirects to the outside what you're supposed to direct to the inside.
Absolutely, that's it. The person is thrown over. That doesn't mean that one doesn't need to start a family or anything. Everything is needed, everything is possible, but this shouldn't hinder a person's spiritual growth in any way.
Well, by the way, very often people ask questions, and we receive letters that people understand that the videos help them, and they start to work and do spiritual practices, but still, the question is that they don't manage to separate the spiritual from the material.
And this is religion's fault. This is really a misfortune which was created by representatives of religious organizations themselves. After all, what illusion did they impose? That in order for a person to become spiritual, he has to be constantly in God. He has to be some kind of hermit.
Yes.
He has to be holy and contrived to such an extent that he is continuously with God, right? But again, this person staying with God is in constant contact with the mass of people. The path of pilgrims to him does not become overgrown. Well, isn't it so? And what is that done for? For, again, excuse me, manipulating the attention consciousness of people. But here binding takes place at once. A person does nothing. He lives in a forest or in a cell somewhere. He, excuse me, eats modestly. He wears some rags. But a constant flow of people goes to him for some advice on life. And he gives it to them, begins to control their lives. Well, isn't it so?
Well, yes. Is the commandment, do not love the world or anything in the world, being fulfilled?
Of course. But that's okay. Those are their problems. They took upon themselves this sin and it's their burden to carry. But what does this generate? This generates precisely in people who feel the urge to take the spiritual path, that a picture pops up in their head where one should be some kind of a hermit. How come? You've got a family, you've got a job, right?
Responsibility.
And immediately consciousness tells, if you had a lot of money, you wouldn't need anything, you would provide for your family, then you could engage in your spiritual development quietly as an egoist. Yet, tell me, for whom or how can a family, lack of money, illness, or anything else be a hindrance? Can it hinder a person's spiritual growth? When we talk about internal processes rather than external ones. But consciousness always imposes the external due to what? To the things that these subcultures, which now exist under the guise of religions, have imposed. Well, isn't it so?
Yes, indeed. People, consciousness in general, have these mindsets that a person, when he embarks on the spiritual path, he as if renounces everything. But here the point is not in the fact that you renounce. Well, it just looks so from the outside. Well, in fact, just priorities are changing. It's just that you're not interested anymore in doing the nonsense you've been doing before and in putting your time and attention into it. You're much more interested in what's inside.
Of course. Well, I'll put it simply, shall I? A person grows up. His young people are hanging out with friends. He smoked hashish somewhere, drank wine somewhere, had a beer and so on. But the person embarks on the spiritual path. He understands what the ultimate high is and not substitutes, excuse me. I mean, it's easy to distinguish between the alive and the dead. Everyone understands this, is that right? So when he understands all this, he understands how destructive that very wine or alcoholic beer is. He understands how destructive hashish is. And he understands that idle pastime does not lead to anything when he can spend this power and energy on spiritual development. on helping people, that is, on creation, not on consumption. And, excuse me, what did you renounce here?
Well, yes.
It simply becomes unnecessary for you.
In fact, what is inside is not that, well, it's just much more interesting. It's like
Of course.
you live in this world, you've learned something, you've traveled somewhere, you've talked to different people, you've tried different life formats, like that. And what's inside is unknown, it's completely new, it's really interesting, it's like a whole world. Well, it's like
It's a bigger world.
consciousness offers you to eat broccoli all your life, while there are gardens of unknown fruit. I mean, it's something you don't know at all. Well, what can be more interesting in life in general, and how can you spend yourself on some nonsense, in fact?
You have now been supported by all vegetarians, after mentioning the gardens of unknown fruit.
Fruit.
Yes, or broccoli. But the example is correct.
Yes, this state is also described in Sufism, that a Sufi should always be within in the sitting position, meaning he is the one who is vigilant to keep the state of communication with God. Well, that's what they call it. But it turns out that what he does outside does not affect his inner state in any way.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about now, yes. I mean, it's just...
That's the practical experience of people who gained it in practice.
Yes.
It's a practical experience of people who acquired it in practice.
Yes. I mean, nothing can prevent a true Sufi from being in a dialogue with God.
Of course.
Because God for them is the beloved, to whom they direct their love in every their...
And they get it from Him. That's the point.
Of course.
After all, what happens in this world? We strive, let's say it again, to receive love, but we don't strive to give it, do we?
Right.
That is, consumerism dictates. While here you don't only give it, you also get it. And you give just a little while you get something greater. Is that bad?
But you can get it only when you yourself start giving.
You yourself start giving, really generating and giving your love and your gratitude.
Because if you don't give, you have nowhere to get it.
Of course.
Because you're full. You're full of your illusions, of selfish beliefs.
Like a full glass, right?
Yes.
And you can't pour anything in there anymore.
No purity can be poured in.
Of course not.
At some point, you just realize that the real, true pleasure is in giving away.
And why? And there is a phenomenon here. Now Nicole has touched upon a very interesting point. Why do spiritual people always give and have such a need? They spend their time, their strength to communicate even with those who, let's say, do not even want to listen or sit and criticize. For example, a person criticizes, refuses, while you explain and tell him from one side, from another one, in the care of his soul, hoping that one day he will understand something, when he will feel this love and will stand, let's say, next to you. Yes? And you will already share this love together. People don't understand why this is happening. Guys, it's very simple. The need to give away arises from the fact that you are overwhelmed. And the more you give away, the more you get. That's, that's like the power that you share, but you get stronger because you share. And that's not a paradox, that's the reality.
Yes, and people very often don't understand. I mean, why somebody explains his spiritual path, why people gather, spend their free time to convey something to somebody so that a person just starts living in the ultimate high and feel kaif. And this is just because when you add more kaif, you get twice as much kaif, and your life becomes more beautiful. And when society is also like that, and the whole world is like that, well, don't you want to always live in such a world in principle? Well, and this is so natural.
It is precisely such a world you always want to live in. And you can live in it all the time, not just reside in it temporarily, like in this one. I can't imagine living in this world forever. It's tough.
It's also interesting that the synonym for the word kaif seems to exist in different religions, and that very orthodoxy, it is bliss. And what captured my interest is that even in the classical Hebrew language, it turns out that in the place of the word bliss, there is another word in the Old Testament, and it is directly related to the verb. And people always have a question, wait, a state of bliss? It means something has descended, happiness has come.
You received, of course.
You received, right, while here related to the verb. And with what verb? It is exactly the verb to go the straight way, meaning to go, to act in order to achieve your goal.
To act. There can be no other way and there cannot be otherwise. After all, bliss, or that very high, is the result of your action, your deliberate action. When you go the straight way, when you invest your efforts and time, when you really burn with it, then you gain this. Well, isn't that right?
Yes, indeed, God is the ultimate high, kaif, because this is the supreme good, meaning this is God.
Yes.
That God is the supreme grace and such pleasure. It's Also, about the fact of how important it is initially at once to invest and give this love by yourself, because the question arises, what should a person do at initial stages, the one who doesn't know what love is? Well, the words love, happiness and health for him are like a wish, like a wish for the birthday.
Do you know that there are a lot of such people? In fact, this is a huge percentage of people who do not know what love is at all. I don't want to say numbers, but they are depressing, believe me. In fact, there are very, very few people who really understand what love is, what happiness is, and what life is. This is not a paradox, it's true. Therefore, it is sad.
But what is joyful is that if a person wants, he will be able to do this.
He's able to do everything.
He's able to do everything, and there are no...
Everything depends on his choice.
Yes, there are no obstacles, because people often say that everyone is able, but not me. Consciousness advises them.
Well, there is precisely no lie here, because consciousness is speaking instead of a person, an actor in his head that indeed won't be able to comprehend this. God's horizons are out of control of consciousness. Consciousness always has a material horizon which it cannot cross, so it doesn't lie. But a human being is not consciousness, and he can.
The most paradoxical thing is that consciousness throws you either to the side that you cannot, or vice versa. There is also a moment of ambition, right? An ambition from consciousness on the spiritual path.
It creates an illusion.
This is also such a funny moment, that at some point you are sitting and thinking, I calculate the schemes of consciousness, that is, I understand everything. The path is clear, that's all. I'm about to become a Buddha now, it's a piece of cake. And at some point when you hear this in your head, well, at that consciousness doesn't allow you to enter a spiritual practice freely. Well, it's kind of absurd. Well, I mean, you also understand. Well, I mean, it happens to everyone, either that way or another.
This is not absurd. This is a reality. This is normal. Again, what does an actor create in your head? He creates an obsessive illusion and feeds you with it. And he gives you false hope or tries to prove to you that you are already almost a Buddha, right?
Yes.
So what are you looking for? You already know everything and the like. But the actor cannot perform elementary practices. Why? Because it is inaccessible to him. It is accessible only to personality, precisely the spiritual practice. Whereas meditation, sure, auto training, no problem.
Yes.
Right?
People also ask a question about holiness. What a holy person is like. I sort of guess, but my consciousness draws a lot of things to me. I'd like to clarify for myself. Well, what does it mean?
A holy person, may I tell you straight away?
Yes.
Guys, it's very simple. A holy person is an alive person. And an alive person will never die. His body will die, but he will never die. This is who a holy person is. While everything else is an illusion imposed by consciousness that he must be some kind of not like everyone else.
There is also another practical aspect when people are faced with, for example, in projects, well, people who work on themselves and they already have some kind of do's and don'ts, what is acceptable and what is unacceptable, and sort of this wording is spiritual, that one is not spiritual. Yet, is such grading actually correct precisely during work, when some kind of social projects are underway, and consciousness begins...
Well, again,
Yes.
social projects are aimed at acting in this three-dimensionality. Let's just say these are earthly projects. And how can you fit the spiritual to the earthly? Well, a simple question.
Well, yes, right.
Simply, if there is a goal here, there is a task, and it needs to be solved, right?
Can there be any spiritual wording?
Well, spiritual wording. The spiritual essence is the same as conscience, the same as morality and everything else. Well, it's natural. It's natural state of, let's say, a person who follows the spiritual path. Of course, it restricts something somewhere. But again, this absolutely does not correspond to the reality drawn by consciousness. That is, if a person is holy, he shouldn't use bad language, he should, well, I don't know, he cannot spit chewing gum past the litter bin. Well, this is morality, ethics, somewhere it's appropriate, somewhere it's inappropriate. What does this have to do with spirituality? A simple question, right?
If a person is holy, an
Yes,
image.
or like manipulations often take place.
Yes,
After all, they
yes.
often manipulate the spiritual. This is spiritual, this is non-spiritual.
Yes.
Right.
And one's interests, one's views are dictated by whom again? They are dictated by demons in the head. This mustn't be done because this way it's not spiritual. Explain. Why this way it's not spiritual, or this way it's spiritual? There are moral and ethical things. There are tools for achieving some result here. Meaning, this is explicable. Where do we live? In a consumer world, in three-dimensionality. and there are its own laws here. Excuse me, it's like an artificial intelligence. There are certain laws by which this modern artificial intelligence exists. Well, of course, it's been hyped beyond belief, but nevertheless. However, can spirituality be likened to artificial intelligence? Guys, where is spirituality and where is artificial intelligence, really? Come on, how can I stick spirituality to my navigation system to say, listen, you guide me along an unspiritual path, right? And I need to go from point A to point B, but along the spiritual path. Well, I can imagine how it would freeze, you know? So should it guide me through all the synagogues and temples or what? How to understand? Well, seriously. People get wrong, but they get wrong because of the mind, because they pay too much attention to simony, but not to spiritual growth. They want to seem to be like, let's say, spiritual personalities, but they don't want to become such themselves. And why don't they want to? Because, just like Nicole said, everything is fine, but consciousness does not let you into a spiritual practice. Although you are already spiritual, yet you cannot perform a spiritual practice. Why? The spiritual one who sits in you cannot plunge there because it is, pardon me, like a piece of ice which we need to put, well, I don't know, into a smelting furnace, right? But how would you put it there? It will melt after all. It's not comfortable there for it. It says, no, I will not go there. Therefore, you don't need spiritual practices, you are a Buddha already. Why would you perform them? You know everything. You already... Yes.
Yes.
Well, in this case, fear is also imposed, which fear of losing this state.
Of course, and this is what we say regarding spiritual practices. Let's take prayer practices. After all, what is a prayer and how should it be done properly? And what did prophets say about it? And what did those elders we mentioned say about it, right?
The state of love.
It's love.
Yes.
It's all-embracing love. It's deep prayer states where there are no words, no stirring.
Yes.
And what does it mean, no stirring, but eternity resides? Well, if we take real elders and prophets, what were they talking about?
Yes.
This is exactly the contact. This is precisely that very spiritual practice, but with a mantra. What did consumers overlay it with?
A request for something.
Yes.
Sure, again, we are coming to...
So it turns out that nowadays a mantra or prayer is often perceived as a request for something external.
This is a protection mantra,
Yes.
this is a consumer mantra.
This one is for health.
That is for changing some external conditions.
And where is spirituality?
Meaning basically, if it used to be a change in a person's inner state, nowadays it turns out that in a consumer society, it is mostly interpreted as striving for some outward changes. And you understand that this substitution happened as far back as, suppose, this state of happiness in ancient Greece, eudaimonic happiness, you from good and demon as spirit, but it is clear in what meaning the term spirit is used. That is, it turns out that now as well, and this already implied happiness in the understanding of welfare,
Right.
meaning well-being was changed to welfare. So it turns out that the inner state, which should be good, well-being, the state of being well, was replaced with welfare. It's kind of when you have a lot of something, like success, right? And it turns out that...
With property status.
Yes, with property status.
Wealth, gaining wealth.
Wealth, right. Welfare in the meaning to gain
Well,
wealth.
yes, when you have your wealth.
Right.
Nowadays, the concept of wealth isn't just
Yes.
the state of your soul,
Yes, it's what you possess in the material world.
What you possess, yes.
but it is what is your welfare, how much money do you have?
How much? How much did you get?
Well, of course.
Meaning that it turns out that this changes the approach completely, and you understand why now. Let's suppose if you take the civilization as a whole, you've just mentioned artificial intelligence and these topics. In what context should the state of happiness be considered? In the context of how one can manipulate neurotransmitters, serotonin or dopamine, for example, oxytocin, to artificially recreate these so-called states? But this is really just an illusion. This is some kind of an emotional outburst, meaning it's the same as if you saw a picture, but these are not feelings. Actually, this has nothing to do with the true life. But nevertheless, for example, our civilization now seems to see around this a solution to almost all the problems, that it will be possible through new robots to implant some electrodes or these neurotransmitters, which are by means of some genes. As I've read recently, I'm just amazed that people bind happiness to some gene, 5-HTT-LPR, I think. I mean, they found a gene that is supposedly responsible for happiness. If a person has it, then...
It's not responsible for happiness, but for release of endorphins.
He can be happy. If he doesn't, he can't. Meaning you understand that everything narrows down, that a person begins to feel as if this is some ordinary thing that you may or may not have. Although that's what you said, that's what he is, that's his real life. How can it be manifested in any transmitters or genes or anything else, if that's your essence, in fact, what you are? And your life is about developing it, discovering it, identifying it, finding it out, like Nicole said, that before you were like...
And why are people about to stimulate it artificially? Because they are lazy to work on themselves. They are not really lazy, and everyone aspires, but consciousness forbids it.
Yes.
But they are so bound to consciousness, it dominates them so much that they don't see another way. They're even afraid to think about what it is like to give up consciousness. But nobody gives it up. Even if you want to, you won't give it up. As long as you are here, it'll be like a shadow all the time. It's natural. And we recognize the world thanks to this three-dimensional world. We communicate here through consciousness. The question is who controls whom, whether it controls you or you control it. When you control it, that's good. But when it controls you, you will create a substitute for happiness. You will be high on drugs or alcohol or with someone, doesn't matter. But all this will be material. It will be an artificial high. And it doesn't matter whether these are chemical reactions caused in your neural group or these are brought-in chemicals. But it will all be an illusion. It'll all be temporary, and it'll all end with the death of your body. And then, excuse me, there will come the truth and what a person faces. Because the truth is revealed in the end, but there is nothing a person can do anymore. That's the point.
The most important thing in this is that when a person really comes into contact with God and happiness inside himself, then he lives. But when there are these artificial outbursts of emotions, he dies, while the system lives at his expense. And you understand what is happening now, that the system kind of uses people so that they not just have and give emotions, but also make some drugs which would stimulate the growth of these emotions, so that it eats even more and people at that moment die even more. I mean, how is this real picture? How is it like?
Well, I'll explain to people because they won't understand.
Yes.
After all, indeed, the majority of people today do not live. They exist in illusion and someone lives instead of them. They are like avatars and demons live instead of them, but it seems to people that they live. Let me give a simple example. We have already mentioned it more than once. A person is in a state of hypnosis. When we turn off secondary consciousness and lull primary consciousness, it is suggested to him that he is some famous performer, and the person actually perceives himself as this performer. Personality doesn't have a critical assessment of three-dimensional situation. It doesn't care what name you have here because this name is artificial. It is not your name. And you reside here just for a moment and you do not yet leave. You only have a chance to leave. This is just a sample that you have been given. And you must develop in this pupa and become a butterfly, or simply wither away. And so an illusion lives instead of you. And this is indeed so, because all this is artificial. But we perceive it as reality when consciousness dictates to us, when it creates a lot of problems and so on. And it's extremely difficult for a person to break away from this. But what does it mean for a person to break away? If a person knows that this is so, when he observes himself, we talked a lot about it, I don't want to repeat how to do this. There are a lot of videos, books and everything else. But in fact, in order for a person to get a chance to realize that he is a human being, that he is a personality, he needs to work hard and refuse a lot, and say no to consciousness. Nicole has a good vlog where she said that when she was taking the first steps, she wanted to contact Anichka. She felt that it was necessary, but consciousness resisted and told her, no way, don't do this. And Nicole said, I took the phone. I know that I need to call. Consciousness says, no way. Consciousness says, no, but she presses the button. And at this point, she's already with us. If she didn't do this and listen to her consciousness, where would she be? In faraway sunny Spain, or no one knows where else, but far from us.
Yes.
I am saying this figuratively, but those who need it have understood. Well, isn't that so? Is this simple? In fact, it is very simple. However, it's easy to talk. But when a person makes a choice, it's extremely hard, because the actors who have dominated the person his entire life, who have lived instead of him and gorged themselves. It doesn't matter even if you are hungry and have no money, believe me, you have so many emotions, so many outbursts at this time, and the actors gorge themselves because they don't need anything except energy food, and this is true. It's like, excuse me, again, those bots in this. They don't care about your mood or anything else, like bots, you know, those very artificial intelligence that throws information to you. If they were given a task to reap money of you, to trick you, to advertise something, they will do this. They don't care. They care nothing for you. So does consciousness.
Yes, but what precisely helps to take this first step is the knowledge. Because it has been said many times that this is like little beacons on the spiritual path. This is when everything is against you, but you push forward, you rush forward into the spiritual world, to your personal freedom, because you feel this inner need. And when consciousness yells, don't do this to you, or the system starts to attack you a little, well,
But you understand that it's the system.
yes,
And you understand and know why it does that.
yes.
But this is only when you understand and know, when you make an effort, when you study it, when you observe your consciousness, then you understand the substitutions. But then you grow up and mature as personality. Whereas if it remains in an infant state, and practically the whole society lives in an infant state when avatars live instead of them, isn't that so? But what is needed in order for an infant to start developing? Not only to receive knowledge, to accept it, to hear it, or something else, but to use it.
To apply it.
To apply it, of course, in practice. And then practice gives you an understanding. And then you begin to understand what Nicole is talking about now.
Yes.
That it is hard. Yes, it prevents, it interferes. But you go ahead and do and get the result. And then one day there comes the ultimate high, kaif, which never disappears anywhere anymore. Is that right?
And what is interesting, it's like Nicole has just said about the fact that you go regardless of anything. It's also such a beautiful feeling of contact with the knowledge. After all, if you tried something in this world and it didn't work, you would quickly refuse it. While here you understand, yes, it cannot be that easy there. Maybe not from the first time.
No, of course.
Not from the second, not from the third. It's different for everyone. But in spite of that, there is so much attraction, so much magnetism to it that you go. There is no stopping you. I mean, the aspiration is so huge. And so consciousness doesn't understand what's embedded there, what truth is hidden there and what power.
The aspiration of personality for life and enormous power behind it. For there is nothing more powerful than the spiritual world. Who can be more powerful than God? No one. An illusion, a bug. Let's not go back, but it's true. This whole world with all its universes, there are many of them, while the spiritual world is one. And there is nothing to compare it to. Is it possible to compare life with death? A simple question. And here is a simple example. Ask yourself, my friend, why were you born? What did you come into this world for? To worry, to suffer, to be tormented, to rejoice? It doesn't matter, but all this will pass. What's next? So has nature created in this way? It endowed us with mind, endowed us, with soul, so that a person engages in no one knows what and strives no one knows where, and that's it? Or as they say in religions, that nobody disappears anywhere, and then if you serve the religion, it means you will go to heaven. If you did not serve, will you go to hell? One should not serve religions. One should serve God. Then everything is right. Then all religions are good. I don't criticize religions in any way, I just want to say that all religions have grains, the grains of the truth. And it is possible to come to God through any religion, if you aspire to Him. Isn't that right? That's right.
And I also wanted to say that now you notice such a moment that in modern society, such notions as God, soul, even happiness are separated as some sort of spatial philosophical categories. And sometimes it seems to a person, just an ordinary modern person, that this is something very distant from me. Although in fact, if you look at it from the perspective that the point is that it's you, it's your feelings. I mean, it's not something far from you, but it's your range of feelings. I mean, just like now you can, I don't know, speak, see, and feel something, some cold or warmth. There are feelings that are expressed in a completely different way, but it is something that cannot be described in words, but it's inside you. Aren't you curious to feel it and know it? I mean, even from such a position that...
Out of curiosity,
as a first step. Isn't it interesting for you?
But the thing is, Anichka, that curiosity, it's, we can go and watch some movie out of curiosity, look at some goods in the shop, and we've satisfied our curiosity there. While here, in order to get at least some result, a person has to spend a lot of time and effort,
yes,
at least to feel or realize or understand that consciousness is not him. This is extremely difficult. Here are observations, a lot of tools they are given.
But it is very interesting. That's what I wanted to say. It's the same as we said.
But again, it's interesting. It's interesting when it comes from personality.
Yes.
When a person strives for something, when he strives for freedom, spiritual freedom, happiness, joy,
yes,
then this instrument is interesting for him.
Yes.
While if a person is under the control of consciousness, and consciousness rules him, and he is completely under control, he is like a biorobot. Yes, something flickers in him, But immediately he easily goes for a substitution, where he has to perform some ritual, go somewhere and give something to someone. And everything is in its place, right?
Quickly, a quick result.
And you don't have to do anything, because this is the simplest scheme, you know? It's, excuse me, like an artificial intelligence. Now we are back to this topic again. It always follows the simplest scheme.
Yes, the same schemes. I mean, it turns out that...
Well, they are not the same, they are very simple. Algorithms are different there.
Well, meaning I meant based on a limited set of these schemes.
Of course.
Meaning that in artificial intelligence, as it has already been confirmed by currently existing experiments and so on, there are sort of no ways which would go beyond its limits. Like that very recurrent point with chess players, for example, that artificial intelligence which plays chess today and has already been created, which has analyzed all the games for the whole time they've existed, no grandmaster can beat it because he simply cannot go beyond the options for those moves. And this shows that...
In fact, even in chess, the options of moves are limited.
Yes.
And what is artificial intelligence?
The same.
Well, I've already given an example. It's a GPS navigator, a calculator, it's also artificial. It was one of the first artificial intelligences. And what is artificial intelligence in your understanding? How do you understand it? Well, just as most of our viewers, friends and fellows. How do you understand artificial intelligence? Describe.
Algorithms, programs.
Well, initially, yes, it is understood in such a way that it is precisely a program created by people for fulfilling certain goals. Besides, it is already self-learning now, because there is already deep learning, meaning when it is capable of learning and sort of...
Machine learning.
And when it can analyze information to achieve a certain goal.
And what is a neural network? It's fashionable now. It's all built on a neural network. What is a neural network?
Well, it turns out it's simple sets of information that take place according to certain algorithms and can interact with each other, leading to a certain, well, yes, algorithm, meaning a behavior, a result, so to speak.
It's an attempt to create neurons that interact with each other through complex or simple programs. When neural learning takes place with the help of, let's say, a teacher, as they say, right? That is, to put it simply, an operator is sitting and performing inputs. A mass of tests and errors, and if it is successful, that's all. It gets recorded. Then the next one. And this is such an interaction.
Or the analyses when, for example, a lot of information is given.
All this is learning. Or there is deep learning, the so-called machine learning, when a machine operates on its own. It builds more complex algorithms of interaction between these neurons and the like. But the meaning of the action is the same. Well, let me give you some examples for people's understanding how limited this modern artificial intelligence is. Yes, it can work as an autopilot. It can drive a car, but it's all programmed, it's all entered. It doesn't matter whether by an operator or the machine was self-learning through creating problems and analyzing the database that was provided to it anyway, right? For example, there is a robot that can flip a pencil. We set it a goal and a task for the pencil to land accurately upright. And so the machine calculates 1 billion times while flipping it with what force, what amplitude and what spin so that it lands upright. And if it's successful and it landed so, that's it. This gets recorded, this triggers the neural network and impulse is transmitted and everything else. And this is being worked out so that it always happens like this, taking into account some external factors. But banally, we changed the table and it's not working anymore.
Ah, yes, sure, really.
Is this really intelligence?
Exactly.
Well, excuse me, it's just a banal, simplest program. But if we set such a task for consciousness, it would say, have you guys gone crazy? What for?
Why would I do this stupid thing, right?
Absolutely right.
Exactly.
That's the difference between artificial intelligence and that very artificial consciousness. A simple question. Can we create an artificial consciousness in hardware? Nowadays, many people dream that this is possible.
Well, this is actually the objective of research.
Yes, certainly.
To eventually develop an artificial consciousness.
Many, like our Silicon Valleys and the like, set such parameters.
Right, moreover...
They say within the nearest 10, 20
Yes.
or 50 years, we will come to the point that we'll be able to create
Models of the brain are now being developed, for instance, computers with 2 petabytes or 3 petabytes of information, meaning in order for them to be able to model these neural networks and supposedly create an artificial brain.
And do you know what the trouble is, guys? No matter how many computers we create, and no matter how much we increase the capacity of our computers, in order to create billions and billions of these neural networks, we will never create a brain. Never. Why? Because elementary things are not taken into account. First of all, consciousness is more of a field structure or a cloud structure and understanding of these. It is there. While here, our brain operates, here indeed, from the perspective of neurophysiology, it is very similar to a neural network. Well, it is a simple... For instance, a child stands up, falls, learns to walk. This is memorized, this is formed. And this is really similar like learning with a teacher, meaning like robots. A robot undergoes learning in the same way, only a little faster than a child. This is very similar. However, it's the primary experience of primary consciousness. It's actually a basic model. It is, well, just look. For example, a calf is born. Couple of minutes and it's already on its feet. A couple of minutes and it already walks. Thus, the program is activated in it. If we don't teach a human to walk, he won't learn. Why?
Exactly.
Because there is a certain quantum interaction between neurons and consciousness, you see? That is, everything's a little bit different. And generally speaking, the neural group does a totally primitive thing. Well, I actually have an idea. I've come up with it in order to give an understanding to people of what consciousness is, of what they strive for. As of today, I'll digress a little. An artificial consciousness is extremely complicated. Why? Let's just take a simple example. Again, based on a modern understanding of neural networks and all the rest. Let's say we can program the life of an ant, right? Like to create an insect that will perform all the functions of one ant. It's much more difficult to program an anthill.
A group.
But we can do this. However, we will never create and imitate the life of ants. Why? There are objectives and tasks that change. After all, there are so many variables which are difficult to take into account. And now let's imagine, the objective set for ants is to propagate, seize new territories and so on. But they also perform a tremendous function for nature as a whole.
For the ecosystem as a whole, yes, exactly.
Absolutely right. And all this should be taken into account, the feed and the consumer. On the whole, all this is linked. Yes, it is programmed, but it is there. And just imagine, if we program a certain sort of cluster of ants, all of them as a community of ants, we will lack hardware to program all this, and we won't have time. I'm just rightly saying how difficult all this is. Yet, to simplify this and give an understanding of what people strive for is basically possible. And so today, at least taking into account the primordial Allat physics, I've come up with an idea. Why not try? We are talking so that our people see the difference between artificial intelligence, bots, right? Nowadays, bots learn to talk,
Right.
and basically they say it's difficult to distinguish. Why? They analyze millions of conversations, questions and answers, and all this is repeated immediately. But again, owing to that very machine learning, the entire behavior, supposedly the intonation, however, they are not alive. And it's supposedly extremely difficult to create this today. But we can. And so an idea emerged. Why not create it in order to put it and talk to it in one of our videos? Of course, it's a little difficult. Why? Because the base has to be established, similar to the Silicon Valley, where we would take good specialists who... Because, well, this is a little difficult. We have issues here. Everything we can operate with, pardon me, is stone axes and bludgeons. I mean modern hardware in terms of information technology. Nonetheless, we can rely on something. And we can use it with IQ of 100%, although the IQ of artificial consciousness can be increased to 1000 and even 10,000. And now there is a question. Imagine, people, I'll just ask you. An artificial mind, consciousness, that includes both primary and secondary consciousness, and again, it includes a field structure of consciousness with an IQ of 10,000. Can anyone imagine it all, even hypothetically?
Well, this seems to be impossible at first glance.
This is easy. But that remains consciousness. So I simply set myself a goal. It's interesting. One needs to keep oneself busy with something anyway. We are experimenting a lot. It is sort of... But in this case, the project is a bit complicated. Firstly, we need to immerse people in this topic. They need to be taken out of, let's say, a certain stereotyped office life, at least somewhere to nature, so that they work there. Why nature? Because the city is not conducive to such creative work. That means we need a base, a mini Silicon Valley, smart people who really strive for this and who are not traitors, because traitors are not needed here. The information is extremely complex, but at the same time, it's all real. And according to my calculations, I think if we actually engage in this, well, I think 6 to 8 months, maybe sooner, and we will be able to talk to this.
So soon? Wow.
I understand that now many who deal with IT will say Igor Mikhailovich is telling us fairy tales. Guys, no, these are not fairy tales. It's absolute reality. I'll even give you a little hint on how the work with the neural group can be improved. Excuse me, this is an elementary thing. What is quantum interaction? We know it. I won't give you lectures. I won't talk about linear algebra. You know it well because you have skills. You write programs and the like. But let's imagine, okay? For example, we divide our neurons into left and right ones. Or, for example, into even and odd ones. For instance, one neuron is white, and the second is automatically programmed by the machine consciousness as a black one. One as to give, another one as to take. One to the left, another one to the right. Such are the exact opposite. Training is twice faster. Is this difficult to make? It's not difficult at all. Why do they not do it? As of today, it is, I'm sorry, it's a pale imitation, which these terms can be reduced and it can be improved. However, if we operate neural networks, we will never really create the consciousness. I'm talking about real consciousness similar to that of a human, which is capable of self-development and will possess almost all the characteristics of a human. Well, it's interesting.
So when you said that it would be alive, meaning it is directly in the context that it would be not just able to learn a secondary consciousness, but precisely...
No, it means that I absolutely want to create that which will completely correspond to human consciousness.
Human consciousness.
It will have primary consciousness, secondary consciousness, subconsciousness, and all other functions. But the issue is that it can potentially develop infinitely. That is, the issue of IQ
There's also...
is out of question to it. If you give it freedom, it can develop infinitely.
But there arises an issue which nowadays...
A moral one.
Well, yes, a moral issue that...
What is the moral issue here about? First of all, why has such a thought come to me? And why have I supported it? If we can solve certain things, basically I will do this. What for? For people to see what it is and to talk to it. That's the point. And for them to ponder, is it worth doing and striving for? Or perhaps we will develop neural networks, legally restrict it all at this level, and will not go further. What is also a problem? I understand it sounds like science fiction now, but our friends got used to the fact that I tell a lot of things sounds like science fiction, right? However, some people get convinced that this is far from science fiction when they are not lazy and don't just sit being idle, but act. So, this artificial intelligence can be integrated into the mind of a living creature with a sufficient volume of the brain. This is easy. And this is really so. It will already be a living creature similar to those very apexians who are capable of reproduction and so on. But this gives a certain restriction due to volume and energy. After all, a very important aspect in this case is energy. In order for us to create now something that doesn't exist at all, at least primitively at the level of primary consciousness, at least partially, we need megawatts.
It turns out energy and volumes of information too, right?
And we need so much hardware that, pardon me,
Yes.
both Google, Yandex and all put together simply won't be able to handle this.
Yes.
Whereas to imitate something, to emulate, this kind of simony can be tracked in the system everywhere. Well, this is not consciousness. This is intelligence. Fine, let it be intelligence. Yet again, who, how? Today in IT we have about 30 definitions of what intelligence is, right? While I'm saying that for me a calculator is already intelligence. Why? I tell it 2 times 2 and it tells me 4. You see?
Yes.
Well, just like it should be. The main thing is not to argue in the marketplace in Odessa. They have a slightly different calculator there.
Calculator intelligence.
So everything is fine, it works correctly.
Then it's also really interesting what you say about artificial intelligence, that nowadays all the developments that are being done are... One of the theories is that with the developed artificial intelligence, at one point or another, it may come to a decision to destroy humankind out of pity, at that sort of... because people are so primitive so that they don't suffer.
Let me explain. Artificial intelligence, this was overhyped back then with Sophia and the like.
Right.
Whereas the Sophia, excuse me, is a banal calculator.
You mean the robot Sophia, don't
Yes,
you?
this is a bot with a calculator. This is nothing. Well, I don't even dare to call this machine consciousness. Well, this is an ordinary bot. It's like, excuse me, Siri in your phone.
Yes, right.
Or like T9, right? Everyone uses T9.
Yes.
There is such a bot, you know. When you type, it
types words incorrectly.
And like a well-known joke about T9, may the deceased creator of T9 rest in peanut, right? Well, it's true. Well, it's funny.
That's right. So far, there are preliminary questions.
This is precisely what our intelligence is. We can bring it to perfection, it will be all perfect and it will work in all languages and without distortions. But this intelligence will never become consciousness. Never. Why? Because it's bound to such schemes, excuse me, which don't work in the understanding of consciousness. The understanding of consciousness is much broader. It is extensive. It's impossible for a machine to teach itself to become alive. While now we are talking about the living, that is, but we are talking about completely different possibilities. We don't use... Yes, the neural network is actually used there. That's why it is necessary to... There are initial moments of connection. But this is merely, let's say, such a basic model for contact with three-dimensionality, while everything else is on hardware. Of course, hardware should be a little... Well, we will do this. I have analyzed it a bit. This is quite possible. Perhaps we will do this. Guys, I don't say 100%, there are a lot of issues in fact. We need computer scientists, we need a base, a mini Silicon Valley. But the interesting thing is that we can put to shame all Silicon Valleys, no matter what they call themselves all over the world, that strive to create artificial consciousness, make it huge and developed, which will solve all our problems someday in the future, while we can literally do this within months. If we want to, of course. But if we don't want to, then we won't. We are free people after all, and we are entitled to choose what to do.
Yes.
Right?
This may be a good reason for people to ponder how they are actually different than from...
There are pros and cons. But I think speaking with an artificial consciousness that will identify itself as a living being by all parameters, well, this is extremely interesting. And the difference between talking to bots and that one will be huge. And by the way, to train a bot, even having combined those that exist, so that it would communicate like that, is extremely difficult. For example, it takes months or even years to take some kind of game. A simple example. IT geeks will understand me. We take a complex game where people communicate with each other online. They don't just type, but can also talk to each other, right? And to create a bot that could replace a person in the game, I mean, so that we don't understand that it's a bot. It's possible, it's real, it's not difficult. It's actually very simple. All this is done precisely on neural networks, but this requires a lot of time and quite a huge analysis so that it can imitate all sorts of tricks, it should understand slang easily and everything else. Yes, we ourselves can teach it that, because the machine is capable of perceiving it all. How much time, how much hardware and how much energy does it take to create it? Well, just like that. But it will never become consciousness, because beyond the limits of this game it's not alive. Whereas in the game it can create, it's merely a slight simony of life. Well, what concerns basic matters in the game, but in no case beyond that. Whereas consciousness is consciousness. Consciousness, it's like the one we have, right? Actors are sitting in your head and telling you about all sorts of problems. This is interesting, and most importantly, it is both living and non-living. You know, it exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Well, this is also interesting. Why not play this?
Yes.
After all, we are engaged in all kinds of projects. The pyramid or something else. Well, this is interesting too. The pyramid, by the way, is far from being started. There are plenty of topics there to reveal and to surprise, but the design itself is quite complex, let's say, and interesting. No less interesting than artificial intelligence, but this is surely a bit more complicated. Well, I want to put it next to me to talk, to communicate.
Yes, you always amaze. It's interesting.
Ask. Yes, it is very interesting.
Well, it's interesting. Well, it's just interesting. You know, our boring life needs to be spiced up with something. This way is actually more fun to be here, right?
Then there are also questions about the future and the development of artificial intelligence in it. Such futurological predictions are constantly made that, for example, there are fewer and fewer jobs for people nowadays, precisely because machines replace them.
I will say that this is good and wonderful. Only along with the growth of such machines that can replace mindless human labor, excuse me, there is a lot of work that should be done by a machine, not people. I'll put it simply. I support this. This is wonderful, but besides this, a creative society should also develop.
Yes.
Then this is good.
Yes.
When an opportunity is guaranteed for people to live comfortably, but when all the hard, stupid and unnecessary work is done by the machine, that's where neural networks are indispensable. They are stupid like a tank, they do only what they were ordered to do, what is programmed in them, and they can develop to extremely restricted limits. And they will never begin to identify themselves the way a human identifies himself. That is, everything is very simple, but they will never become consciousness all the more. No matter how much hardware and energy you give them, this is unrealistic. The principles and mechanisms are different.
It's just that there's also such a, so to say, substitution that, according to the philosophy of Karl Marx, there is a point of view that labor created man himself. Meaning, how is it that we will stop working physically? Won't we degrade then?
Wait, no one says that humanity will stop working physically. There are gyms for that. Why should a person build a house or lay bricks, or heat one's fingers in the freezing cold? If a 3D device can do it now perfectly, right? That is, they bring in cranes which literally mold the house you want, and they mold it, make it the way so that you don't need to repair it because it has everything. And this can be done in a day. Or we will build and repair a house for a year. Well, is it funny or not funny?
Yes, it's funny.
Why waste time, efforts and everything else?
Yes, this meaning of life is no longer relevant.
And do you understand that?
After all, human life is indeed extremely valuable.
Yes, exactly.
Human time and attention are extremely valuable.
Yes.
Right.
And if we would pay this attention and our time to creatively develop, and to develop, not the way we have. After all, why is the consumerist order problematic? It is directed inward. You see? It is not aimed at external development, and this is destructive because it consumes only what is inside. It is consuming the main resource, and that's it. While we need to create a creative society that grows in breadth. This means a lot of new worlds, a lot of new opportunities. Our science, some people brag about what we've achieved. Guys, what have we achieved? We've just voiced. It's an illusion of achievements. The real worlds have achieved. It's scary to even mention a figure how many times more than we have achieved. And in front of us there is a vast path of exploring the world, exploring the universe, exploring ourselves, knowing the order of this world in general. After all, it is possible. A lot is possible. I am even afraid to voice it because they will actually say Igor Mikhailovich has got carried away by fantasies. Well, is it so? But I'm telling the truth. I'm not fantasizing, friends. Everything is in our hands and everything is possible. Just to approach the world a little differently, to stop eating each other. Because in reality, we just eat each other's attention, the most valuable resource, and waste our time in vain. Instead of living and gaining the eternal we eat from each other even that little which we have. And this is wrong.
Yes, how important this life is indeed, and how important it is to cultivate this life. I remember that just recently, in the video that we are recording now, you said that consciousness doesn't let a person plunge into this life.
Of course.
But at the same time, there is a paradoxical phenomenon. He actually runs away from that very consciousness, doesn't he? So he actually wants to get rid of this oppressive state. He escapes into drug addiction. He cannot even sleep because consciousness dominates so much. And if each person starts observing, he'll see that he runs away precisely from his consciousness.
Of course.
And at the same time, it hinders him, it tears him apart and prevents him from plunging into this depth, into love and real life.
It has such a function. Either it lives or we live. Either we are its slaves or it is our slave. There is no other way. Someone has to obey someone and someone has to feed someone. Well, we will feed consciousness anyway as long as we exist here. But in any case, it's better if it obeys us than we obey it, right? That would be great. Anyway, that's what we should strive for. Isn't that right, my friends? On this note, let's say goodbye to each other and wish each other all the best. And most importantly, my friends, let us love each other and strive for the best. Strive for independence and real freedom. Thank you.